Hello and welcome to the special transmission on the unfolding situation in Afghanistan. Viewers, at this moment, I'm sure if you have been watching news, especially this channel's news, you must be updated on what exactly is going on in Kabul. Afghan Taliban has reached the gates of Kabul. We hear that here and there they have actually crossed over and gone inside. The speed with which Afghan armed forces have collapsed is astounding. I don't think that anybody could have predicted that they will fall this quickly. What happens now is the biggest question. Of course, there are many questions about soul searching, what went wrong, what is happening, what will happen. But the biggest question at this moment is one, what happens to human rights, the people who are there on ground? Because there has been considerable panic. The way international media has been covering the situation must have created a lot of panic. On the other side, we have heard the Afghan Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen assuring people that they will not be avenged, there will not be any attack. And there was declaration of amnesty, clemency for people who have worked for the Afghan government as well. This was reported a short while ago. But that is not all. There are many questions that still need answers. Ashraf Ghani, we are told by Abdullah has left Kabul. What happens on ground is something that we have to actually ask and learn about. In order to help us understand these issues in the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Nazir Mahmood, who is an expert on foreign policy. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. On Skype, we are joined by Journal retired Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, who is a defense analyst. Also joining us is Asif Tutani Saab, who is a career diplomat and who is going to help us understand these issues better. I'm told that Michael Kugelman will also be joining us shortly on telephone. So with that, let me start with Dr. Nazir Mahmood, because we have been looking at this situation for quite some time. But the way Afghan authority has collapsed and the speed with which the Taliban have reached the Afghan capital is beyond anybody's imagination. So what happens now?
Well, apparently, in a couple of days, Taliban will take over Kabul.
Okay.
And Ashraf Ghani, as we just got to know a couple of hours back, has left the country.
Yeah.
About Abdullah's situation is not clear. Actually, Abdullah has released a video statement in which he has blamed Ashraf Ghani, saying that he has abandoned his people.
Mm-hmm.
So what Abdullah is doing, because he himself was a contender to become president,
right.
And had he been president, probably he would be fleeing too. Mm-hmm. But now probably if he is still there, probably he is trying to get some role, which I don't think that Taliban would agree to.
Okay.
So I think all efforts for a negotiated peace deal, as far as Kabul takeover is concerned, Kabul will be taken over peacefully.
Okay.
But I don't think that now there is any chance of any power sharing. It will be a complete takeover of Taliban, the Taliban, and they will impose whatever kind of government or dispensation they want to impose on Afghanistan. So this is the latest situation. And regarding your point about the rapidity with which the Afghan forces have collapsed, probably there were a couple of important factors here. Mm-hmm. If you remember, in March or April, Joe Biden was asked about this concern in one of the press conferences that, you are leaving Afghanistan and the Afghan army is not in a position. So very openly, Joe Biden said that, well, Afghan army consists of 300,000 fully equipped and trained soldiers. These were the words which today many international channels were retelecasting.
Right, and questioning also.
Yes. So those 300,000 well-trained soldiers, what happened to them? Probably they realized that, once one city surrendered and weapons came to Taliban were emboldened and they were more strengthened with new weapons. Yeah. And Afghan soldiers did not see any point in surrendering their life. And second important factor was Taliban's announcement, which was very positive announcement, that if Afghan soldiers, official security forces surrender, there will be no retribution.
Right.
They will not be killed.
And that is a very important point. There were other statements coming from Suhail Shaheen, which will be welcomed. But how important is it that this statement actually comes from a Taliban commander who is standing at Kabul's gate? Because at this moment we don't know how united and unified Taliban is.
Apparently, it seems that they are united. Up until now, there are no reports. Although some international channels are saying that in various cities, Taliban are not listening to commanders like Suhail Shaheen and Mullah Brother, who have said that women will be allowed to go out. And there are videos in which women are actually going out and shops are open. So that means now Taliban have clearly said that we will not be imposing that shuttlecock burqa on women. Just hijab would be good enough. Just like the dress code is there in, let's say, Saudi Arabia or in Iran. So now apparently it seems that they have changed that. They will not be imposing those strict. Only time will show how far the regional Taliban commander follow that instruction. But as of today, Taliban statement was clear that they will not be imposing those restrictions that they imposed earlier.
Right. And it is important to remember that these statements, if they are made on ground, it might actually mollify the local population base, because there is a lot of panic on the streets. Earlier I was told that one of our guests has joined us on Skype. I don't know which one is. Right. General Raza, Lieutenant General retired Raza Mahmud Khan has joined us. General Saab, let me ask you that we know that Ashraf Ghani has left the country. And at this moment, what we don't know is whether he has resigned or not. So what big impact will this have? If he resigns, then of course there's going to be a transition government. If he doesn't, is there a chance that he is going to actually preside over a government in exile? General Saab. Right. General Saab, you'll have to unmute your camera and, of course, your speaker as well. Please go ahead, sir. Right. General Saab, I'm going to come back to you. There seems to be some technical problems. Let me go to Ambassador Asif Durrani. Ambassador Saab, your take on Ashraf Ghani's possible resignation. Do you think that he has resigned by now? If he hasn't, and if he has left the country, what does it mean for the future of Afghanistan?
I think there are a couple of channels, including BBC, have reported that President Ashraf Ghani has already left for Tajikistan, along with Vice President Mullah Saleh and the National Security Advisor, Hamdullah. So if that news is correct, which is then written on the wall, then what the things are to be there to in future. And Taliban have already entered Kabul, but there are also reports that they are under instructions that to keep themselves away from the main city center, or the seat of the government is the government of now. But it's all a victory. It has been acknowledged by the Americans. It has been acknowledged by the West, and it has been acknowledged by all independent observers. So much so that now when you look at the Indian media, they are also now looking for the stories, and they now grudgingly acknowledge that Taliban have had the upper hand. So they are now very much a reality. Of course, Taliban have shown sagacity in a sense that politically they have shown maturity, and they have avoided any reprisals. They have announced general clemency for the people who were in the government or in the past they have been involved in atrocities. They have also asked the people not to leave the country. They can continue with their normal life. This is again a departure from the past practices when prior to 9/11, the behavior Taliban would display. So this is quite a qualitative change and quite surprisingly, quite a pleasant change if you look at Taliban's past performance and past attitude. Yes.
Right. Let me now bring in General Dada Mohammad Khan as well. I think the technical problem has been resolved. General Saab, my question to you at this moment is the situation in Kabul still seems to be in transition. Now the question is, on one side, Afghan Taliban seems to be asserting itself. On the other side, we see the other dimension as well, that a trained army is very quickly getting dissolved. These people are trained soldiers. They are going to be there. Do you think that there is a possibility that like in Iraq, these people can later reorganize themselves and join some terrorist group like ISIS was joined by Saddam Hussein's former soldiers?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. So, your first question is about the transition government. I think whatever little we know so far is that the head of the transition government has been agreed to by both sides, and the media informs us that that person has been, he's an Afghan, but he's a US citizen who has been teaching at the NDU in the United States. So this has not been confirmed as yet by anyone, but this being the first step and an important step, I think everybody is looking forward to how it is going to unfold, for how long this transition government is going to stay in power, and what is going to be the mandate of this transition government. Are they going to first, form some kind of a transitional constitution, because the present Afghan constitution is not acceptable to the Taliban. And then later on, we have to see whether they are going to go for election to form a new government, or is it going to be a combination of election and selection. And the third important issue is also whether Afghanistan is eventually going to be a republic or an emirates. So probably, the interim government will decide all these things. There are questions about, the future and the status of the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. I think that was an issue which the Taliban wanted to discuss in Doha with the Afghan government, but I think that discussion did not happen. Right now, because they have given amnesty to all officials in Kabul, and I believe that eventually all Afghan armed forces who are elsewhere in Afghanistan would also be given amnesty, less perhaps, the officials of the NDS who have been perpetrating, barbarities on generally the civilians and innocent peoples, and particularly the Taliban. So we hope that this Afghan National Security and Defense Force would reorganize under command and control initially of the interim Afghan government, and subsequently, they would be used to help and assist in organizing the elections and then the normal defense of Afghanistan. So I do not see, the Afghan National Security Forces turning into militias, although some of them, as we are aware, when they surrendered to the Taliban, they were asked to go home. They left their weapons with the Taliban and they've gone home. But that isn't a problem. I think they can be recalled whenever the interim government is fully in control. And once that happens, then I think security in Afghanistan would become a lesser problem.
Right, Jadal sir, I'm going to come back to you, sir. This is a very important topic, so we want to include as many voices as possible. Michael Kugelman joins us on telephone. Michael, thank you very much for joining us from Washington. Let me ask you about your reaction to the speed with which the Afghan forces have collapsed. Were you anticipating this fast decline, and what happens now?
No, I admit, like many others, that I'm very surprised at the speed with which the Afghan government, and really the entire state, I mean the military as well, has collapsed. And even the Taliban itself has suggested that it's surprised about how easily it was able to take over so many of these areas without even a fight. And, you know, the preparations had been made for many years by the Taliban. I mean, as you know, well before President Biden announced his decision to withdraw, the Taliban had been taking control of a large number of districts across Afghanistan, and they were able to gain footholds in areas outside of major cities and provincial capitals, which basically put them in position to eventually launch these final operations that they've done in the recent few weeks. But still, I can't imagine that anyone could have imagined that they would be able to essentially take over the entire country in a period of days, not weeks or months, but days. And I think that this is really an indictment of the Afghan government and its inability to restore morale in the security forces and to get troops what they needed, and really an indictment of the Afghan government's inability to come out with any type of broader counterinsurgency strategy over the last few years. And I think that's one major reason why we are where we are today.
All right. And what happens now, Michael?
Well, I mean, it's tough. You don't want to make predictions because the situation is so fluid. But the fact that Ashraf Ghani has now left the country, as multiple reports have suggested, theoretically that should allow things to move along a bit, because that had been the key Taliban demand for so long. Now that he is out of the scene, I think that now you need to look at the possibility of talks and negotiations leading to some type of interim arrangement. But quite frankly, what worries me is that unless I missed it, the Taliban has not yet declared any type of ceasefire or truce. I mean, it's not waging warfare outside of Kabul right now, but it has not declared a ceasefire. I really would like to see that. I think many in Afghanistan would like to see that. That would certainly create a better negotiating environment. We've said for so long that for the Taliban, violence is leverage, and it's not going to lessen violence unless it really has to. But now it's pretty much in control. The U.S. troops are on their way out. Ashraf Ghani is gone. It's gotten every single thing it's always wanted. So there's no excuse, in my view, for the Taliban not to agree to a ceasefire right now.
Right. Just to qualify this, will you care to elaborate the difference between the statement of standstill statement that came from Suhail Shaheen and this ceasefire announcement or possibility of it? How do you distinguish the two?
I mean, there's a lot that's unclear right now. You know, if we are going to have Taliban leaders and spokespersons declare that there won't be any fighting, great. But, you know, unless there's a clear indication over a period of a few days that, you know, we're not seeing fighting and that the battlefield commanders are heeding any type of guidance from the civilian leadership and the political leadership in Doha, then I'm going to be skeptical. I mean, let's keep in mind that for many years, Taliban political leadership has continuously talked about its desire for peace, and yet, you know, every time you have a battlefield commander who's quoted in the media, they'll always say that we're going to keep fighting so long as we have to. So, I don't know, there's not much to fight for at this point. The Taliban is in position to essentially take on the lion's share of power, if not all power. But I think we should be very cautious, and I think that we should wait over the next few days and see if the Taliban does indeed refrain from fighting, because that's a key step. Only when you get that clear formal declaration of a ceasefire, and it seemed to hold over a period of days, only then can I think everyone start to rest easy a bit and hope that there could be a more healthy environment for the negotiation leading to some type of post-Ashraf Ghani government.
Right. Michael Kugelman, do stay with us. I'm going to come back to you, sir. Let me come back to the studio. Nazir Mahmood Saab, you have listened to all the participants. And the question now is, what does Pakistan and other Afghan neighbors do? Pakistan first closed its border immediately at Turkham, and now we hear that there has been some agreement that traders who were stranded there will be allowed to move. But there is a serious challenge because we don't know where TTP elements are, and they might be hiding in plain sight. So how does Pakistan secure its borders, and what happens in that direction, in that aspect?
Well, there are two things to think about here. Number one, there is humanitarian consideration, because we know that there are people who come for treatment, and there are traders, and common people, civilians who come and go. Around 20 to 25,000 people used to cross the border every day, and most of these people are as I said, travelers and patients for treatment. So that should be kept open. Because we cannot just simply say no to people civilians, unarmed civilians who want to come on some business. But a huge influx of refugees should be avoided and resisted, and I don't see that there will be this time any huge influx of refugees, and that is thanks to Taliban's new policy that there is no major fight going on. So civilians are not being killed in large numbers, otherwise it would have become known.
And regarding the bordering areas, bordering Pakistan, they already were fully in command in most of the places, right?
Yes.
Now they have expanded their sway in elsewhere.
Yes.
So there might be some problem with Mazar-e-Sharif, other places, if there is going to be one. But there are displaced people who are sitting in Kabul. What happens to them now?
Well, this is now, whichever new government comes to power, there are, according to reports today, there were around 100,000 or 150,000 displaced people sitting on streets in the capital, in Kabul. These people have food insecurity, they don't have food, they don't have any other facilities. So this is a human tragedy. Whichever government comes to power in a couple of days, and I think it is just a matter of a couple of days. If not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, there will be a government in Kabul.
Are you sure it won't happen today?
It may happen today even. It may happen today, but at the most, as I'm saying that at the most a couple of days. So maybe tomorrow morning they will announce that there is an arrangement and the power has been transferred. So, and then power transfer will be peaceful, as all indications show. There is no fighting. As Taliban take over, this will be their first responsibility to take care of these displaced people. And how they do it, only time will tell. This is number one. Now, coming back to your question about Pakistan, there were two aspects. One about cross-border infiltration. Secondly, you rightly pointed out that, there are TTP groups. So what I am concerned at, though there may be some lull in fighting, but what I am concerned at is essentially Taliban is an extremist group. Nobody can deny that. Now, if they try to impose again extremist views on people in Pakistan also, especially in border areas, there are extremist groups, and we have been fighting for 20 years. We developed a national action plan, and that was countering violent extremism. So our main concern should be, and is, as a citizen, I am concerned that if once again there is a resurgence of violent extremism in border areas in Pakistan, that will be a serious problem for Pakistan.
Right. And there are reports, whether we don't know, although we don't know whether it is connected with Afghanistan, but we have seen an uptick in violent activities, especially in the Waziristan areas. But allow me to actually go back to Jarud's, Ambassador Asif Durrani. Ambassador Saab, right now, when you look at the overall situation, it seems that, Afghan Taliban's takeover, one way or the other, is something that is quite clear. But at this moment, everybody might be worrying about why the US had to go, what happens. But later on, people will try to point fingers. And usually, there are voices that end up pointing fingers at Pakistan. How to avoid that situation, sir?
I think,
Asif Durrani Sahab, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. I think there are many issues you have raised in this question. One is, US is living under an agreement with Taliban, and they have to withdraw their forces. It was done by President Trump, but renewed by President Biden, although he extended the departure dates a little bit further. And he said that from 1st May onward, we will complete our withdrawal for 11th of September. Now it is, the cutoff date is 31st August. So it is all very much, I don't agree with the people that it's a precipitous withdrawal. There is almost a year and a half that this agreement was signed and everything was clear for everyone that troops would withdraw from Afghanistan. So therefore, I don't find any, this objection is strange to say that Americans are giving in a hurry or in a half. That's not the case. Secondly, when you talk about Pakistan, you can't blame Pakistan. Pakistan did facilitate these talks between Taliban and the Americans, and they have reached to a successful agreement for the withdrawal of the American troops. And you have seen that Americans, they also came to the conclusion, which now you find in their leaders' statements, that we have established over 300,000 Afghan army. They are well equipped and all that. They should have defended 2014 onwards, when the bilateral security agreement was signed between the Americans and the Afghani government. It was the Afghan army which were, in fact, security inside Afghanistan, in the country. And if they could not withstand the Taliban onslaught, then it shows that there were certain weaknesses within the Afghan army's training or their motivation that they could not sustain. That's why you see that over a period of just 2 weeks, almost the whole of Afghanistan has collapsed. So, and security forces have not resisted the Taliban. And wherever there was a resistance, it was quite nominal. And so much so that the strong warlord like Ismail Khan, he was arrested, and the Mazar Sharif, one expected that there would be fierce resistance. Same was the case with Shabaran, the stronghold of Marshal Dostum, but it did not happen like that. So what I'm trying to say is that there seems to be a tacit understanding, even among the armed forces in Afghanistan, that I think that this was untenable, and the kind of support which Taliban have had at the grassroots level, it was unprecedented. They would not enjoy that kind of support before 9/11, when they were actually ruling the country, and they could not actually control the whole country. So here there is a qualitative change, and this is what now it gives a semblance of hope, I would say, because I'm still optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic in a sense that we have yet to see how Taliban behave when they are in the government. Because in my reckoning, the real test for the Taliban's political sagacity would start. Before that, it would be too early to say that they will be successful rulers, because till the time they were launching an insurgency, I think they did not have the responsibility to be answerable. But once they are in the government, then they'll be answerable to all the deeds and the performance of the government. Yes.
Right. General Saab, let me ask you, you're a career soldier, let me ask you about these two important aspects. One, take us to that mental space where an army, a trained army, dissolves, and whether it has been witnessed elsewhere as well. Just quickly, because I know that Ba'athist did exactly that, but then they joined ISIS, and then circumstances changed for quite some time. On the other side, I want you to actually comment on the two possibilities. One, the Afghan Taliban's takeover of Kabul directly, and the second, the possibility of creation of an interim government. If the Taliban directly take over, what exactly will be the reaction of Afghanistan's neighbors? Please, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I think there are a number of reasons of the failure of the US, NATO, ISAF, Afghan government, and also the Afghan armed forces failure in Afghanistan. And very quickly, because there was a very vague mission starting from Mr. Trump and even before him, nobody was clear about the mission of the end states given to NATO, ISAF, for the Afghan armed forces. There was very little public support. The fortress mentality, of these forces, the casualty shyness of the Western forces, as well as, the Afghan armed forces, the very low morale, poor motivation, pay, and also the faulty ethnic balance of the Afghan security forces. All these, put together, they led to their defeats and to the successes of the Taliban. Also an important aspect of that is that once the United States and NATO, ISAF decided to leave, then I think it was, and there were actually announcements made in the United States that the pay and allowances, the weapons and equipment, even the food, everything is going to be provided by the United States. So I think no army, what's its name, would want to, fight another group which is against, this kind of an activity and which wants foreign forces out from them. The issue of the interim government, I already talked about that. Right now, I think what needs to happen is that as soon as the interim government is formed, then the Troika Plus, who have actually signed a document, on how the peace process is going to unfold, they must decide to collectively recognize the interim government, so that it is empowered, to carry the process further, and this peace process should now not, operate from outside of Afghanistan, whether it is Doha or any other place. It should now happen in Kabul itself, and it should be given, the legitimacy and all the help and support which was granted to it in Doha. A very quick comment, on the use of, on how the Taliban were able to so successfully, come and, conquer back all these areas. I think they were using a different strategy, which was a combination of persuasion, jirgas, and then using the minimum force required. So I think they are going to use the same strategy for taking over Kabul, and I think that has paid dividends. And for them now to say that there is going to be a ceasefire, I think it may not be as important because whatever fighting had to be done has already been done.
Right. General Saab, I'm going to come back to you. Let me go back to Michael Kugelman. Michael, at this moment, there are certain aspects what we need to look at. One, how much do we know was agreed upon, actually agreed between the American forces of America and Afghan Taliban in Doha? We know that Doha agreement was signed, but was that also about some kind of constitution, some kind of arrangement that is going to take place in coming days? And is it in public knowledge?
Yeah, the Doha Accord, the one of 2020, was very limited in scope. It really was focused on issues directly bearing on the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan. And as you know, the main outcome of that agreement was for U.S. forces to leave and for the Taliban to agree not to shoot at them as they left. And the idea of the Doha Accord was to essentially allow it to set a path or create a path for a broader negotiation between the Taliban and the Afghan government, which would discuss the types of issues that you just alluded to, the political system, the constitution. But, the U.S. government, the text of the agreement and U.S. government messaging soon after the Doha Accord came out really emphasized that, those political issues are for Afghans to discuss amongst themselves, meaning between the Taliban and Kabul and other key political stakeholders. So I am not really convinced that there has been any type of substantive discussion about what the next, what Afghanistan's future political system will look like. And of course, as you know, the intra-Afghan dialogue, which was set in motion by the Doha deal, it didn't get very far. There weren't many meetings. When there were meetings, they didn't really decide on much other than general parameters for the talks and administrative parameters for the talks. They hadn't even settled on an agenda. So I think that there really has not been any headway made at all in negotiations focused on the political state of affairs. But based on how it looks like things are going now, the Taliban is probably very soon going to be holding power, and it's going to be in position to put in place the system that it wants, that I fear will be very similar to the one that it had in the 1990s, which was very problematic for many reasons. I don't know the extent to which non-Taliban political stakeholders will be in a position to influence any discussions about the future political system, but the Taliban has the upper hand, has all the leverage. It's essentially waltzed into a position of power, very close to it. The government has collapsed, and there's not really much standing in the way of the Taliban. So I don't think that you're going to have other actors in Afghanistan in a position to push back against the political system that the Taliban will like to put into place. Now, the role of the U.S. here, I imagine, would be limited as well, though I'm sure that there will be efforts on the part of U.S. diplomats to try to impress upon the Taliban the need to respect certain areas, women's rights and all, but these are not things, I'm not very confident that the Taliban would be willing to uphold those issues. Given the Taliban's track record, given its statements in recent months, doesn't really give me much confidence that human rights and civil rights and women's rights will be a major feature of whatever system it puts into place, especially if we look at what's been going on in some of the areas that have been controlled by the Taliban over the last 2 years.
Right. Right. Michael, before I let you go, let me very quickly ask about another important aspect. You highlighted that there might not be any agreement and nothing is standing in the way of Afghan Taliban. But taking over and running a country are two different things. Afghan Taliban doesn't have the kind of money or the kind of support, financial support that was available to Kabul before the takeover. Now the question at this moment is, will Afghan Taliban not compromise that chance of legitimacy, financial recognition and support if it actually takes over in coming days without support of any transition government?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it really comes down to how the U.S. and other key capitals and other donors of Afghanistan define peaceful transfer of power and define power obtained or acquired through negotiation. As things have played out to this point, I think that the U.S. would be in a position where it would have to extend legitimacy to whatever new government emerges, because the Taliban has not seized power by force. It has used force to seize a large number of areas. But what's been happening in Kabul, this has all been a negotiation. There's not been any force used, and so I think that if the Taliban essentially has handed the keys to Kabul and the keys to the country through peaceful negotiations, I'm not sure if the U.S. would have much of it would be difficult for the U.S. to justify not legitimizing the new Taliban government per what it said in the past. But indeed, if this is seen as a unilateral negotiation where no one else is allowed to weigh in on how things emerge with the new system, and the U.S. and other key capitals conclude that the Taliban is not being fair and equitable, then there could be differences. I really don't know how the U.S. government will react, but it's said for so long that it will not give legitimacy to any government by the Taliban that's seized by force. That's all it's said on the legitimacy issue. And the Taliban looks like it's about to take power, but not through force. So that's where things are now.
Right. Michael Kugelman, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your valuable time. Let me come back to the studio for conclusion. Nazir Mahmood Saab, it is important to actually recommend what steps should be taken by all stakeholders in coming days. If you want to actually give it a shot, please do.
Well, first we need to see which stakeholders are right now. It seems that America is no more, even UK or European Union, they are no more major stakeholders there because they are evacuating. Now, those will be better stakeholders who stay there. Russia has not evacuated its embassy. China has not evacuated its embassy. Pakistan has not. Iran has not.
Okay.
And these four countries, I think, a lot will depend now on these four countries. If when Taliban take over, Russia and China recognize Taliban, and I think that these will be the two first countries to recognize the Taliban government. If that happens, then naturally Pakistan and Iran will also be recognizing them. So what I foresee is that, you know, this will be what America has done, and this is still surprising that how America could, you know, give this, because China will be ready to increase its influence. China wants to expand CPAC in that region. So for China, it is a golden opportunity, and Taliban, the question regarding they don't have money. If China comes in and Russia come in, and if Taliban have support of these four major countries, stakeholders, then Taliban will not have a problem. Even if USA and the European Union shun them, it will not make much of a difference, because what have they done to Iran?
Right.
Iran is surviving.
Right. But that means that legitimacy, at least in the eyes of these four stakeholders, will be very important. So we still have to see how this goes. Let me very quickly ask Ambassador Asif Tutani to conclude his comments and tell us what are the steps that might be needed in coming days.
Thank you, Farrukh. I think it's the real test for the Taliban when they come to power. And as far as recognition is concerned, immediate neighbors of Afghanistan have had a relationship with Taliban, whether it's Iran, Russia, or China, and the way Mullah brother was received in China, and the way his photographs were flashed on the international media as if he was the foreign minister. So this shows that they have now much better acceptability. But at the same time, having said that, recognition would be a crucial step for Afghanistan, Taliban's legitimacy. And we have to see how it comes up. We should not be the first one to recognize Taliban. I think it's still the time that major powers do recognize Taliban. Otherwise, it would be the replay of.
Yes, sir. I'm told that we are running out of time. Very quickly, let me ask General Saab also to add his conclusion, and then we conclude this segment.
You know about the influx of IDPs from Afghanistan or the refugees. I think we know that we have to be extremely careful in allowing any additional refugees, because there should be no doubt that there are going to be terrorists of all kinds and hue entering Pakistan, as they have done in the past, you know, to harm the CPAC or, to create chaos inside Pakistan. India will continue, to use this period of imbalance in Afghanistan for its nefarious activities, and we should be aware of that. Of course, there should be, I think, a quick meeting of the National Security Committee. We should decide all these issues that we have discussed today related to the recognitions, the border securities, and our relationship with next government.
Right, General Saab, I'm told that NSC is meeting tomorrow. So let us hope that these things actually come up and there is a resolution. I'm told that we have to conclude this segment now. Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan Saab, thank you very much for your valuable time. Asif Dutani Saab, thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for being part of the program. Dr. Nazir Mahmood, always great having you in the show as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. This transmission will continue, but I have to actually thank this panel. And while we are covering what is going on in Afghanistan, we will be commenting more on this. Here's an important thing. Whatever is happening on ground in Kabul and in Afghanistan is a sobering moment for everybody. Let us not squander it in blame game right now. First important thing is to find solution for the people who might be stranded or who might be in distress. So this was this segment. We'll come back with a new panel on the hour. Take care.